Well, hello, Scott Harris.
Hello,
welcome
Mike
to
Glenn.
our podcast. Just grateful that you have given us some time today. So, Scott, you've recently joined the team at First Baptist Nashville.
Yes.
And our friend Thomas West
Yes.
is there. So what is
Yes.
your official title?
Yes. So, Mike, I am pastor of discipleship administration. That includes missions. And let me just tell you a quick word about First Baptist. What excites me is not only its amazing history and where it's located. You and I have always had a passion to pour into the next generation. Right? At Brentwood Baptist, we went from 3 missionary units on the field to over 40.
Right.
And a lot of that is equipping the next generation. But what's unique about First Baptist Nashville, if I have anything to offer, it's not only the church, but it's as if God tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, Scott, I want you to go help that guy." So it's the church, but about Thomas and his leadership, his wisdom at his relatively young age. He just turned 40. And I'm not as old as you.
I remember 40.
But I vaguely remember 40. It's like, hey, I want to pour in whatever I got to the next generation.
It's always twos.
Oh, yes.
Always twos.
And it's been a great companionship.
Barnabas was probably older than Paul.
Yeah. So that's been a really fun dynamic. It's been good.
Good.
And you've always modeled that well. And I always admired that about you. You would make sure that you were around folks who, were of a different generation. And so maybe I'm doing that in my own little way for however little time I got.
Was very excited that he decided to bring you on staff with your
Thanks
passion
for your good word
and vision and for what a church can do in its community and that kind of stuff. Now the first obvious question is, you were in local church ministry.
Yes.
You left local church ministry to work with Mission Increase.
Yes.
And now you're back in local church ministry.
Who knew?
Well, now it's your fault.
That's right. No, I was going to say it's all your fault.
We can't blame anybody.
It's all your fault.
You knew now going into it.
That's right.
What was intriguing about First Baptist?
Okay. Well, first, a little bit of background. So, Mike, you and I had the honor of working for you, with you for 18 years. Mm-hmm. Learned so much. We had a lot of fun. A lot of good things happened. It was hard work, but it was just fantastic. And so that set me up for what I was able to do at Mission Increase, which then, of course, led to First Baptist Nashville. And so I just want to say you and Brentwood are a very important part of this story. So through mutual friends, said, hey, there's a new guy coming to First Baptist Nashville. Mm-hmm. You need to meet him. And they said the same thing to him. Bill Wilson Jr., dear friend, Jay Wolf, right, former pastor of First Baptist Montgomery, who was Thomas West's pastor growing up. And so,
and Jay is still his mentor.
Oh, yeah, very much so. And so after Thomas had been here a few weeks, Thomas and I met for lunch, and we just started getting into a rhythm of meeting about once a month. Mm-hmm. And man, I was just so impressed with his story. Had always admired First Baptist from a distance.
Sure.
We're about, 15 miles away, and knew people there and knew some of its history and all of that. And so as Thomas and I got to know each other, and this idea started to emerge of, hey, what if there was a place for me at First Baptist Nashville? I went through a checklist, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Mike. Tell me how many churches. So there are 47,000 Southern Baptist churches. Mm-hmm. Which is about 12% of all churches in North America, right? A little under 400,000 congregations. Tell me how many churches would fit all of the following criteria. A church that has chosen to stay downtown, is biblically faithful, is dreaming and growing again after a long period of, some would say, decline or stagnation. Has a new pastor who's young and energetic, and it's not just in some obscure corner of downtown.
But it's not that he's young and energetic, but he came from the mission field.
That's right. That's right.
He was pastor. He planted a church just outside London.
In London.
And then came from there to here. So he still brings
absolutely
that mission heart for the urban core and all of that.
It. And has experience in doing so.
Mm-hmm.
And again, First Baptist Nashville is not in some obscure corner of downtown.
No.
It is right in the heart of downtown. And so you put all that together. What an opportunity.
Not to mention the thousands of people who now live downtown.
That's right.
That is a recent phenomenon.
In fact, as I understand it, Mike, 24 years ago when I moved to Nashville and we got to know each other, there were fewer than 2,000 people who lived downtown.
Right.
And now it's 22,000 with a projection of 35 to 40,000 in the next 10 years.
Within a rock's throw of First Nashville.
In fact, I meet people every Sunday who walk to church.
Mm-hmm.
And it's even fun for us. We go out to lunch after church and we walk to lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a new dynamic. So what's new for me in all of this, I've never been part of a downtown church before. I've never been a part of a turnaround story. Mm-hmm. So that's new. But so much, I think, of what we did at Brentwood over those years is transferable, right?
Sure.
Because principles transfer. So it's a new environment for me, but it's not just Thomas. It's the people, those heroes that have stuck with it and have stayed with it and kept those embers alive and could see it. And there's this sense of, hey, something's happening here. And it is, I didn't know if I had another church left in me. But thanks to you and others, it's like, whoa, maybe there's something here.
60 is the new 40. That's what I'm going with anyway.
That's it. And I love my time at Mission Increase. In fact, that's a story, that it was at Brentwood Baptist that thanks to you and your leadership, we needed good, healthy nonprofit partners,
right,
where we could send our people. Mm-hmm. We saw the nonprofit as a partner, not a parasite. And so we then soon discovered nonprofits are just like people in churches. Some are healthier than others. So who helps the nonprofit do better work? Mm-hmm. That led to Mission Increase, which we brought here to Middle Tennessee.
Now tell me about the process of discovering Mission Increase.
Yes. Let me start with.
Let's set the foundation of the discussion that you and I were having.
Yes.
We were moving to a place where we wanted to run members off.
That's right.
We wanted every member to know who they were in Christ, understand their giftedness and their passion, and then release them to ministry.
That's it.
We quickly realized we cannot have enough ministries in the church to accommodate all these gifts, nor do we need to constantly reinvent the wheel.
That's right.
For instance, there was the Hope Clinic and others that were already doing right to life and pro-life ministries that we didn't need to duplicate, that we just needed to send our people to. Others, I talked the other day with Daryl Murray of
Welcome Home Ministries.
Same kind of thing. Homeless and guys out of prison, the transition that Daryl is a master at.
Absolutely.
So there's no need for us to reinvent the wheel.
That's right.
So we started partnering with identifying these nonprofits that we could say to our people, go here. If this is your passion, go here.
Yeah, but Mike, let's back up a moment, because during those years, we had a lot of new people coming to Brentwood Baptist. And thanks to you and Jim Baker and others, there was this decision that we were going to have
Jim Baker, our executive
pastor there at the time. He was there 04 to 14, 10-year period, and brought so much infrastructure and structure to what we did. And so we required a membership class.
Right.
Part of the membership requirements was place, basically an inventory of your spiritual gifts, your abilities, your passions, your experiences. And here's what you did. You had identified to say, we're good as a church, whether you as a church member serve inside the four walls of the church or outside the four. Either is a win for the kingdom. So when you had all these new members coming through, and whenever they marked an interest in anything outside the four walls of the church, it was sent to me. So I was connecting with literally a couple hundred people a year who had a heart for something in the missions area.
Right.
So we needed those nonprofit partners where we could send people to. But there's nothing worse than telling someone, go volunteer at Ministry X, and they come back and they say, they weren't ready for me. They didn't know how to use me.
Had no plan.
They had no plan. They had no vision, poorly run. We don't give them any money, do we? So we had a vested interest to make sure that those ministries had a sharp ecclesiology who understood the value of the local church, not just as a place for money and volunteers, but saw themselves as a discipleship platform for God's people.
Right.
And so as we developed this network of partners, because we had people to invest, we also had mission dollars to invest. And we needed something to make sure that these ministries were getting the training and the equipping they needed. So I went looking, who helps the faith-based nonprofit do better work? We're here in Nashville. Lifeway's right around the corner. Lifeway is a resource to help congregations
local
thrive.
church focus.
Okay? So what's the Lifeway equivalent for the faith-based nonprofit? And I was struck, Mike, by how little there was out there.
Right.
And heard of this organization called Mission Increase. We saw the model. We believed in it. And thanks to you and others, and a key church member who was an executive, who loved nonprofits, but would sometimes get frustrated when he would serve on a nonprofit board that they didn't have the tools in the toolbox. So he and we together brought Mission Increase to Middle Tennessee, and that was 10 plus years ago.
Okay. All right. Now explain to our listeners what Mission Increase is.
Yes. So it is an organization that helps faith-based organizations thrive. Origin story, this godly Christian couple in Portland, Oregon, they tell the story that every December 31st, they would write a check to the local rescue mission with their fingers crossed, praying it would stay open one more year. They thought, what if we didn't only give money? What if we invested our money in developing training for these nonprofits? As the nonprofits grew, we would track their progress. So our investment could be measured in the ROI of key growth indicators for these ministries. 26 years later, they're in 27 cities. They have 3,500 faith-based nonprofits that have coaching accounts. And we measure impact based on how these ministries grow, how to have a healthy board, how to raise money in a biblically non-manipulative way, how to make a case for support. You know, all of those key tools that any nonprofit needs. And it was great. So I was with them for 5 years, still doing some work with them. And but then thought, wow, still here in Nashville, here's a great church with a great past, a promising future. Hey, this could be really a lot of fun.
Give me one more. Okay. What did you learn from Mission Increase that you didn't learn at Brentwood that you will now take into First Baptist?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. A few things. One, or maybe some things that were further confirmed or refined. Faith-based nonprofits, not all, but so many tend to be thin on their ecclesiology.
Right. Yeah, my joke is para-church is always para and rarely church.
That's it. So, as true as that is, fair enough, so how do we help them with a sharper, deeper ecclesiology? And so Mission Increase provided us a platform to imbue faith-based nonprofits with, hey, we know you're not a congregation.
Right.
But you are part of the Big C Church. So what's your place in the Big C Church? How to relate to congregations in a healthy way. So that was a platform to experiment and to figure out how do we help faith-based nonprofits not only meet the needs that are out there, hunger or all sorts of issues, but how do we help them do it in such a way that sees that they're a part of the Big C Church and they have a responsibility to serve local churches. And they're hungry for that. But they're like, well, no one's ever taught us.
That's right. Nobody's ever helped us.
So let's do that. Let's help them. And that started at Brentwood Baptist when we saw that these nonprofits are doing great work and we love them. They're heroes to us. Many of them are members of our church, like a Daryl Murray. So let's encourage them. Let's help them.
But they're also burning out because they're doing it all of their own passion, own energy.
That's it.
They don't know how to work structure.
That's it.
They don't know how to enlist and
right.
pull a team together.
That's it. So we say a lot of heartbeat. Mm-hmm. Let's give them some brain waves. Now, church leaders need that too. We all need that, right?
Yeah,
and there are some people with a lot of brain waves that need some heartbeat too, right? But there are not a lot of learning communities for faith-based nonprofits. And so that was an incredible opportunity for me to hone some of those skills or some of the things that I suspected but wasn't sure. And something else about the nonprofit world that I learned was that God's people often get caught in the middle between the tug of war between their church obligations and their nonprofit obligations. And so a lot of marketplace leaders look at their church and the nonprofits they love and they say, why can't these two structures get along? Something else I learned. Pastors, not all, but most, a lot, I should say, a lot of pastors and nonprofit leaders agree on an erroneous assumption. Sometimes pastors will say, if we were doing our job as the church, we would not need the nonprofit. And nonprofit leaders sometimes say, well, if the church were doing its job, I wouldn't have to do this. And I say, you're both wrong. You're both part of the Big C Church. Right. God has given us kingdom. Right. So we have two structures, the missional structure and the congregational structure. And I would say the congregational structure has priority, but by God's design, they're meant to serve each other. So we're gifts to each other, not competitors. The nonprofit pastor is not a problem to be managed, but an asset to be maximized.
Right. One of the things that we have done in the evangelical church is we have taken obedience out of discipleship. That is, when I say I want you to be involved in discipleship, Scott, you understand I want you to attend a class.
Knowledge acquisition.
I want you to major on trivia about Jesus. And the spiritual people in our church are those who can answer those questions.
All those Bible trivia questions.
All the Bible trivia questions, right? But what happens is, what we forget is that because we are children of the Father, and the Father is on mission to redeem the world, He invites us to become part of that work. Come join me. It is the same way that when we were little boys and our dad said, come help me.
That's right.
Do this that's important to the family. It's the same honor. But there are a lot of things that we learn only in obedience, only in the doing.
That's right.
Now we always make fun of our friend John Thomas, who led the ministry in South Africa.
Yeah,
because some of the crazy things that he jumped into, buying land without the permission of the church, and all of these things that I don't recommend.
That's right.
For those, But he has all of these stories of God's faithfulness because he was in the trenches, doing his best to be obedient to this vision that God had given him.
And I would say in the community trenches.
Right.
Not just the church trench, but in the
he
community trench.
He was in Massapequa.
That's right. Okay,
which was right across the street. But there are some things you only learn in the doing, which then drives worship. Because everybody that comes back off a mission trip can't wait to get to church to tell everybody what's happened.
That's right.
And one of the hard things to tell people is, the God you met in South Africa and Puerto Rico and Mexico, He's God here too.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So because we've cut off the obedience, we rob people a lot of the passion.
That's right. And the hands-on.
The hands-on and seeing God work day to day.
And that's part of God's beautiful design. So not that a local congregation can't find lots of ways to impact their community directly. The clothes closet, the soup kitchen, mobilizing people to share their faith in their marketplace, in their workplace, in their home place, in their neighborhood. But by God's design, the nonprofit gives God's people access to lost
To a
people
community.
in need who actually are open to receiving some help from Christians. So someone who may not go to your church, but they will be at the food bank.
Right.
So shouldn't we show up at the food bank and live out our faith because we have access to lost people?
That's right.
And so, again, we're gifts to one another. So we don't see the nonprofit as, parachurch is parasite, is what a lot of church people think. And then a lot of nonprofit leaders, they're like, I love my congregation. I love my church. I was sitting, listening to a sermon and was inspired with this idea to go make a difference in my world.
Yeah, but now, how do I do that?
But how do I do that? And or the church doesn't care about what I'm doing, and they just want me to usher on Sunday. But I got more to give.
Which is a double whammy, because if you inspire but don't give direction or connection to actually do what they're inspired to do, then they become calloused.
That's it.
And the next time you want to motivate them, I'm not going to get all excited about this if there's no way to do what you're calling me to do.
And so here's something that we were able to do at Brentwood that many times people would say thank you. One thing we did a couple of times a year as a mission staff, we did an inventory. Who in our membership are serving on local nonprofit boards? And who would be some people in our church that have some gifts that they could give to local nonprofits? That's how we as a church increased our leverage and influence in the community. And so we would often go to church members and we would say, this doesn't mean we still don't want you to serve in the nursery. We still want you to give generously to your local church. But there's an after-school program not far from where you live that could really use some of your skill sets.
Right.
And so that was us as a congregation being generous with one another. And that then helped many nonprofits who maybe were a little jaded or calloused about working with churches to say, hey, Brentwood's different. They love us. They serve us. They pray for us. And so it's a win-win for everybody. Everybody wins.
Everybody wins.
There's enough to go around.
Yeah.
Right?
What'd you learn about money?
Yes. Well, I'll tell you this. God's not puzzled by money. He gets it. Money is God's idea. You said something that stuck with me, that money is energy.
Yeah, that's all
right?
it is.
It's energy. And so it's a tool. And we tell people it's more blessed to give than receive. But do we really believe it? And when we as a church were able to model that congregationally, the more money we gave corporately outside the four walls of the church, God more than compensated. Right?
Yeah, we were never short in what we wanted to do.
Never short. So the idea here is that not only do we want individuals to be generous, congregations can and should and need to be generous. Because that's one of the best ways to inspire your people to be generous when they say the church. So back to Living Hope. We had a building program, and the first $1 million of the building program went to our partners.
Went to Living Hope.
Everybody won in that equation. There was no loss. It was all win. It was all gain. So learned over and over and over again, God has it, and he wants to give more of it to us. And that's not prosperity gospel, but our own generosity can fuel kingdom work. And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, when you start walking with God, one of the first things you learn is, I thought I needed all these things in my life to bless me.
Yeah.
And you're confronted on the not so subtle idolatry of stuff.
That's right.
I need this car because it affirms who I am as a man. I need this house. We don't need any of that. The affirmation comes from the cross, and after that, there's nothing that can be added, right?
And when the cross really gets a hold of us, then what we want and desire is not to get, it's to give.
That's right.
And but this is such a message for both individual Christians, but also for churches. one of the things at First Baptist Nashville that we've adopted is we want to be a radically generous church. Mm-hmm. And what does that mean exactly? And it can mean a lot of things. Yes, finances, but also with our facility, given right where we are downtown, right, and all these other things. So the best way to inspire our members to live radically generous lives is corporately, let's figure out what it means. And John Thomas, our friend in South Africa, a story that I love. Now, there's a dark side to generosity, but when they were so burdened at the time, 20 plus years ago, of the AIDS crisis, ravaging their community, they made some big commitments. And they actually deferred some maintenance on their own building.
Well, if you sit in the sanctuary, you can see where the construction stopped. You literally look up the wall, and that's where it stopped.
That's it. Now, some people, that irritated them to no end. This is God's house.
Right.
How dare we not finish? In John's mind, what a great reminder.
Right.
It's good enough. So Mark chapter 2, the hole in the roof, right? These four guys who brought their sick friend to Jesus, they finally got him to where Jesus was. They couldn't get him to Jesus. So what do? They climb the roof. They tear the roof open. And, someone had to pay for that roof. Ministry is not cheap. But I love the fact that our friends in South Africa, as a congregation, they left the proverbial hole in the roof as a reminder we're God's house.
Of the true calling.
The true calling. Yeah. I love that.
And it's a powerful moment when you sit there in that congregation.
And I'll tell you this, Mike. I know pastors and churches all around our world are trying to figure out, how do we live and move and grow in what seems to feel like a harsher world.
Right.
And maybe you need a new sound system. Maybe it's a reeve-paved parking lot. Or maybe it's radical generosity. And I'm convinced that there's a connection between the generosity of a congregation and the church's health. A lot of pastors aren't interested in that. If they talk about generosity, it's how do we get members to give their church more money?
Right.
And I would say that's critical, but that's not enough. So that we as a congregation can be generous.
Can free it up, right.
So I think that's just a wonderful opportunity for pastors and churches to be like, hey, listen, if we want to grow and be healthy, we tell our people to give to God first and see how God will bless. Why don't we as a congregation go ahead and fund that Bible translation initiative, and see what God does? And we got to do a lot of that kind of stuff at Brentwood.
Or establish a theological center for deaf pastors.
Yes.
And deaf missionaries.
That's it. And see what God does. Yeah.
What have you learned? We're hearing a lot about the generations. The builders have left the scene now. Boomers are all now retiring. Millennials, Gen X, Gen Y are now coming on, and we're hearing a lot about what's going to happen in their giving. What have you learned about the different generations and generosity and giving? And
my sense is God has hardwired people of any and every generation to be generous. It may look different from generation to generation.
Right.
So the responsibility and the opportunity for a congregation is to figure out, okay, let's not fight the generational giving trends necessarily, but how do we maximize those generational giving trends?
How do we channel it? Yeah.
How do we channel it? How do we inspire? And so what worked for prior generations, you should give.
Right.
Maybe for the upcoming generations, it's more of we get to give, and here's what we
give.
We can.
And here are some things.
And here's
to do.
how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And
I tell people that the newer generations are, we're told they don't give. That's not true.
That's not true.
They're very generous. And even at Cairo so many years ago, the midweek worship service, we would have bring $1 or whatever. Yes. And we say, here's what we're going to do with this money. And it was always thousands of dollars.
That's right.
That was out there that they would give on the spot.
That's right.
Because if you can tell me now as a younger person that if you give this $1, this person's life is changed. they'll give you the shirt off their back. They really will. They won't give you 15 cents for a light bulb in the sanctuary.
So what happens a lot is often we as church leaders, we don't think we owe them that level of transparency.
Right.
Shouldn't they just trust us? Well, as we know, trust in clergy.
They don't trust anybody.
They don't trust anybody.
With good reason.
For good reason. So let's figure out how to earn their trust
good word.
And not resent that effort, but to see it as an opportunity. And that's part of our assignment. So be transparent. And, I've often heard, trust the people. Give people the information that they need. Because, we as ministers, if we're not careful, we're people, we can get lazy. So our default is just give it because you're supposed to.
That's right.
Thank goodness.
It makes it easier on everybody. Yes, just give it.
Thank goodness maybe those days are over.
Right.
So we all get a little sharper and make sure that our processes are clean and we can show impact. And that grows some really generous disciples.
Right. If I see my money's making a difference, then I'm more encouraged to give. That's one of my favorite stories is you sleeping in an apartment in Hong Kong.
Yes.
Where your body is in the bedroom your feet are in the living room.
Yeah, that's right.
And you can flush the toilet with your foot.
That's it. All right, true story. So, my dad was a Southern Baptist pastor in Northern California. When I was 7, we moved to Barbados. Returned to California for high school and college and seminary. Took a year out between college and seminary and worked at Spurgeon's College in London.
Yeah.
And it was that year with those British students that convinced me, yes, I really do need to go to ministry. So I went to Golden Gate Seminary in Mill Valley, California, became a youth pastor at a Korean church. And when I interviewed, I go, I'm not Korean. They go, we know, but you know English. And our kids speak English and not Korean. And it was a beautiful experience. That got my gaze toward Asia. So when I graduated from seminary and the Korean church ordained me, I went to Hong Kong and I was there for almost 8 years doing student ministry, and I planted a church. And that's where I met Beth, who was born and raised in Taiwan to missionary parents.
Who still speaks fluent
She's
Chinese.
Fluent in Mandarin, served over 30 years in Taiwan, mainland China, and Hong Kong. And so as a church planter in Hong Kong, we started with 6. By the time I left, maybe 180, 190. I don't think we ever quite broke 200.
Yeah, but still, that's fabulous.
But we had people from 26 countries. And we averaged 30 adult baptisms a year in those last 4 years. What an opportunity. And I just thought all churches did that.
This is normal.
But I learned a lot about generosity.
Right.
Every adult in that church for a season had come to Christ as an adult because someone through some missions organization loved him enough to get out of the walls of their church and go tell them about Jesus. So that hopefully God used some of that mixed with all the great stuff at Brentwood and First Baptist Nashville, and let's do some good work together.
When you and I were first introduced by Bill Wilson, the founding pastor of Brentwood Baptist Church, that I followed, he had met you in Hong Kong?
No.
California?
Well, so my wife and I, we were church planters in Hong Kong, and we moved here from Hong Kong to
go
Nashville,
to Vanderbilt. That's right. You were the Asian student at
I think the only reason I think I got accepted into Vanderbilt, they saw the Hong Kong postmark, and they thought it was some DEI initiative. It's like, no, I'm a white guy from Northern California.
Oh, white guy. Yeah, that's right.
And when we moved here to Nashville, grew up Southern Baptist, grew up as a missionary kid.
Right.
Had always,
but it was Barbados.
Barbados. Hey, people there need Jesus. Beach ministry, it's a thing.
It's a thing, right?
So when we moved here, I thought, look, churches are a dime a dozen. Pastors are a dime a dozen. The chances of me getting a job at a church are slim to none. So I thought, I'll just get a job at a restaurant, get the degree at Vanderbilt, we'll go back overseas. my junior high Sunday school teacher had moved from California to Nashville. Remember Ron and Joyce Chandler?
Oh, my word, yes.
And so she had heard through the grapevine we were moving to Nashville. She gave my name to some folks at the church, including Bill and Creeley Wilson. And so 2 weeks after moving here, I'm sitting in your office, and I start part-time. We were still at our old building, 409 Franklin Road, and was there 18 years. So anyway.
Yeah, now you were not called, you were told.
I was told.
Bill McCreely told you will be working here at Brentwood Baptist Church. They told me this is who we're hiring.
That's it. And on a very different scale, you had the privilege of following a man like Bill Wilson.
Oh, yeah.
And you had the foresight. You had come as pastor. Bill and Creeley had gone to do some other things. You invited Bill back.
As missions pastor.
As the missions, not just pastor emeritus, but you gave them a job to do. And after 4 years of doing that very well, as they were retiring, I was able to follow Bill. So different occasion, but you and I have in common, we both got to follow Bill Wilson.
Yeah, but Bill could get away with murder. As the founding pastor.
That's right.
We got stuff done because Bill said do it.
So by the time Bill retired, everybody, of course, was like, we still need another missions
We've always
minister.
had a missions pastor.
Yeah,
Why don't we?
Yeah. So I started part-time. A couple years later, went full-time. And a good piece of advice I gave, which I discovered later was very congruent with how you worked. And it was my dad. I said, Dad, where do I start? He said, find out who in the membership is already doing great work and get behind them.
Right.
Now, I did not realize what a God thing that was, because that's how you were wired. So one of the reasons I think we built an effective, by God's grace, missions ministry is we were able to, I think, capture what was important to you. And what was important to you was, what has God called our people to do, and how do we get behind them? So when I just started having a lot of coffees and lunches, finding out what Steve Moore was doing, what Daryl Murray was doing, what Betty Steersman was doing, and we could get behind that, then they were a great example to our other people. Hey, look what Betty did. Look what Daryl did. Look what Steve did. And then we as a church got behind them. So here's something that I think makes Brentwood different, and I think what we're going to be doing at First Baptist. A lot of churches think, okay, the church has the call, so we can't do everything, we can't go everywhere. So the church has to have a focus. So let's say a church says, we're going to have one international focus. Let's say it's Vietnam. And we're going to have one local focus, and it's the rescue mission. Okay? And what's great about that, it's very efficient. Marshal your resources. It's easy to communicate. There's clarity. Stay in your lane. You can't do everything. Here's the problem with that model alone. What happens when Sally joins the church and she has a heart for Afghanistan? Well, hang on, Sally. We're a Vietnam church. So could you just lay Afghanistan and join us here in Vietnam? No. Or let's say Joe joins the church and his heart isn't the rescue mission.
Wants to work with orphans in Moldova.
Well, now he's a problem to be managed.
That's right, yeah.
Now, what we were able to do is to say, wait, we're going to have our priorities. But the biggest priority is respond and equip God's people for what they're called to do. So when Sally comes and Afghanistan is her passion, guess what? That's not a distraction for us.
No,
part of our job is to help her figure it out. Now, the accusation sometimes was, we're in a million different directions. It's like, well, we got a lot of people and God's creative. God just didn't make one people group.
Yeah, well, everybody's different.
Everyone's different. So so I would say, regardless of church size, have your priorities, but make sure your number one priority is to equip your people, whether it's through your program or whether it's through another platform that you can facilitate. That is not spread thin. That is equipping the saints for ministry.
No, well, you never come up short.
Never.
You never come, and you can't get people to understand that, because once a Betty Steersman begins to learn through obedience, she sees it happen.
That's it.
You know, we go from 8 deaf people on the front row.
Yep.
And she comes to me and says, "We need a pastor for the deaf church."
There's no deaf church.
You don't have a deaf Sunday school class yet, Betty.
That's it.
But we call a pastor.
That's
because of that. All the deaf work
That's right.
happened because of that. Now Betty, and we're picking on Betty Steersman, who led Brentwood to do the deaf work, because we both know and love her so very much. Because of that, now there is a nationally impacting and indeed world impacting ministry because of her boldness, from the small lessons she was learning to the big lessons that she began to learn.
But it goes back even further to an ecclesiology where the pastors can listen and see what God's doing in our people, and we get behind what God's doing in them, versus everything having to come top down.
Right. Well, that's the hardest thing is when other people start loving you church members more than they love you as pastor.
That's right. That's right.
Because our deacons took over the pastoral care ministry. And I would run into people and go, "Hey, do you know?" And they would name a deacon. I would say, "Yeah, I know him. He came and visited my mother. You should have heard him pray. We love him. And I think, we used to love me."
That's right. That's right. And hey, by the way, Paul Taylor, part of the deacon ministry, a member of our church who had a vision for how the deacon ministry could be run better.
Right.
And the leadership of the church said, "Paul, we love it. Go for it.
Go do it.
Go do it."
Do it.
And I think there's a lot of churches, pastors, that may give that lip service, but you have to be secure enough for it to get a little messy sometimes, and trust God with the results.
The different gifts among the people.
Yes.
The people that we had who ran our finances, and that were, I tell people, they would look at a spreadsheet and get teary-eyed, because it was such a beautiful thing to drove me crazy.
That's right. But we need them in that
role. Got to have them, or nothing else works.
That's right.
All right. So tell me what keeps you up at night right now.
All right. I always used to say, be careful of this term called presentism. It's this idea when we tend to say things have never been as bad as they are right now, or things have never been as good. How do you know?
Yeah.
How do you know? I would say, though, the last 8 to 10 years has been a unique time in human history. And we do tend to live in a harsher time. And it seems that God's people are more afraid than ever. So here's what keeps me up at night. Fear is not a good look for God's people. What happens when you're afraid? You tend to retreat. You tend to become more tribal in your orientation. The beautiful us and them, that is God's creation, the variety, becomes frightening and a problem. Now, I think there's an antidote to that.
Sure.
Generosity and mission. But when fear increases, confidence in God decreases. The antidote, when you lean into God's mission and His ways, confidence in God increases and fear will decrease.
What is that? Perfect love cast out fear?
All fear. Yeah. So much of Christianity just seems to be fear-driven, fear of the other. They're coming to get us, or we need to dominate someone. Right. And I don't see that as the way of Jesus. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have power. What's even more powerful against those forces of darkness, the issues are real. We love deeper. We love harder. And not that there aren't lines that can't be crossed, but what keeps me up at night is I just wonder if we as God's people are gonna pay a heavy price as we often give in to our fear rather than going confident that God's ways really do work. So that's something that concerns me. And I'm concerned because of the fear that in time, and I think we're already seeing this in both global missions as well as local missions and outreach. We need to retreat. We need to build bigger barns.
Higher
walls. And that conspires against generosity, the gospel, and evangelism. Mm-hmm. And so that does concern me. A lot of bright spots, but because God's still on the move and God has solutions for that. But that concerns me and that keeps me up at night.
All right, let's end on a positive note.
Yes.
You have just taken a job in a local church.
Yes.
And we'll talk to you and your therapist about that later.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But what excites you?
Yes. At First Baptist Nashville, started in 1820, as I understand it. The first group of Baptists first gathered around 1798. Sometimes Baptists aren't fast. Took them a couple of decades, I guess.
To figure it out.
To figure it out and get organized. So we're a 205-year-old church. We have been on that corner for 140 years. Mm-hmm. It was a center of innovation.
Yes.
Lifeway was birthed in the basement of that church.
And was run out of that church
out of that church. Then, Mike, reading the history, so in 1970, they published a book on the 150th anniversary. The year Brentwood Baptist was started, First Baptist published a book on its first 150 years.
Yeah. Wow.
And you read in those Depression years, they were going to do anything it took not to cut missions. So they did without in order to love their city. Mm-hmm. And so that excites me. And the people there who are ready and who are committed and who are creative, God's people, whether it's at Brentwood Baptist or at First Baptist Nashville, man, they love God so much and they're willing to do whatever it takes. And so I am thrilled about the opportunity. And, First Baptist Nashville, right in the heart of things. And so a couple of things that we've talked about as a church. Number one, in 10 years, what would it look like if half of our people drove in and half the people walked? So I've been asking a lot of people who drive in, and they drive by a lot of good churches. Why? And they say, we love our city. And we believe a thriving city needs a thriving church.
Yeah, I know a lot of those people and tried to stop them and tried to get them to stop.
And now I'm like, hey, keep driving. And by the way, COVID hit churches unevenly.
Right.
And, it was fascinating in just learning more of the history, long past as well as recent past. COVID really did a number on downtown churches because what happened is First Baptist was closed. It's in Davidson County, was closed a lot longer.
Right.
So all those people that had driven for so many years, understandably, they went to a church
that was
open. So the recovery time for some churches is a lot longer than others.
I hadn't thought about that. You're probably right.
As I'm getting to know people, it's weird. I'm new to the church, but not new to the city. So find out who do we know in common and all of that. And these people, they wouldn't call themselves heroes, but so many heroes that have stuck with it. Yeah. And of course, I want to chiefly honor God, but man, I want to honor those folks that have hung in there and all those generations for 205 years. That's pretty exciting.
How many stories do we know that were stories of heroes and it's the hero is the one who shows up.
That's it.
Kept showing up.
In fact, Thomas, today in a staff meeting, we were talking about consistency will win over intensity any day of the week. Just keep showing up.
That's it.
So these are exciting days, and I'm just so grateful for those years at Brentwood Baptist where we were able to do some creative, wonderful things, and years at Mission Increase where I was introduced to the nonprofit world. By the way, in the last 40 years, the number of congregations in the United States has gone from 400,000 to 350,000. Mm-hmm. As a conservative evangelical for a lot of years, I would say that's a liberal problem.
It's not.
No, it's
now.
everyone's
it's
issue now.
Across the board.
400,000 to 350,000. In that same 40-year time period, the best we can ascertain, the number of faith-based nonprofits. I'm not talking municipalities or hospitals.
Right.
The food bank, the transitional housing program has gone from 10,000 to 160,000. Wow. I was in Miami recently doing a workshop where we bring pastors and nonprofit leaders together. You want to see fireworks? Put them in the same room. I showed them that statistic. Mm-hmm. Congregations going down, nonprofits skyrocketing. Some pastors were like, yep, they're part of the problem. They take our money and our people. Had some nonprofit leaders cheer. We're winning. And I wanted to say, you're both wrong. No one wins.
Nobody
unless we're both and up and to the right. So how do we get God's people in these two structures to work better together? Mm-hmm. That will work whether you're in the pastor seat or in the nonprofit seat. Mm-hmm. God's people with a common love for their city, their world, their community, working together in these two structures. A congregation, by definition, is a generalist structure.
Right.
You, regardless of size or income, you have to do cradle-to-grave ministry. Mm-hmm. A church does not have the luxury to say, we need to focus on our strengths. We're good at weddings. We're bad at funerals.
Yeah.
So we're not going to do funerals anymore. We're the wedding church. If you want a funeral, go to that church.
That's right.
You can't do that. Built-in inefficiency. It's part of God's design, cradle to grave. Mm-hmm. That's God's structure for the congregation. But you see this in Acts 13. Barnabas and Saul are called out of that local congregation. They're sent on a missionary journey. Barnabas and Saul and their compatriots, that wasn't a congregation going around the Mediterranean. They were a missional unit meant to plant congregations.
Right.
And so as they did that, churches grew. So what happens is you have the specialist form of the organization. Some call it the sodality, which is a Latin term sodalis, which means a guild, a task force, a fraternity, a sorority. So that's by God's design to go tackle a problem, hunger or literacy.
A unit with a particular specific mission.
That's it. Generalist,
right?
Specialist. They need each other. And so as God's people, as pastors, as nonprofit leaders, we need a higher, sharper ecclesiology to reach our city.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, agreed. Scott, thanks for your time, man. Love your passion.
Love you,
your
Mike,
dreams.
and thank
love you.
I'm honored.
And whatever success, I'm going to take full credit for. You know that. So.
I know you will. And there's a certain percentage that you deserve to take.
Yeah, but I'm not taking all of it. I know you is not.
Love you, brother.
I love you too.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.